right, so welcome everybody. We're gonna get the show on the road. Before I let in our special guest here tonight, uh, if you haven't seen any of my posts or any of my stories, this update is gonna be big. So those who have been following the show for the past season know that the title of the show was called the Lyrical Non-Lyrical Podcast. Well, that was then. And right now, as of today, it's a new dawn. It's a new day. It's a new life. And boy, am I feeling good. What's good, Tito? Today, I'm here to announce that no longer this podcast will be called the Lyrical Non-Lyrical Podcast. As of today, it will be called the Playlist Shuffle Podcast. I'm going to say it again. This is the Playlist Shuffle Podcast. Put that on repeat. You can name your playlist that title on whatever streaming site you got on. But I'm letting you know right now, this is the Playlist Shuffle Podcast. P.S. Do the shuffle. I don't know, some weird catchphrase. I'm working on it. Trust me. Come back later. Actually, no, stay on. I'm going to need y'all on. So, with that being said, I am your host, who is still the same, Jay Malley, here to put you on game with the same mission to widen your minds and widen your ears, talking about music and film. Those who love watching movies or your favorite TV shows, I'm here to basically not just watch your favorite movies or TV shows with your eyes, but also with your ears. And so my goal is to dissect and interpret why music was placed in certain scenes, in certain movies, or on certain characters. So with that being said, I have found somebody who shares the same passion and the same or similar insight as I do. And she's going to hop on here and tell you basically what this is all about. And so we're going to go ahead and invite her in.
Hello.
There you are.
How's it going?
Good. How's it going, Anika?
It's working. Is it working?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Wait, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Wait, it says request to join. Do I have to do something?
No, you're on here now, so you should be good.
Okay. This is my first time ever doing anything like this, so thank you.
Oh, yeah?
Pioneer in
Well, welcome. I've given the update that this is now called the Playlist Shuffle Podcast.
Awesome.
It is no longer the Lyrical Non-Lyrical Podcast. We are upgrading. We are remodeling.
Always.
And congratulations on being, one of the second overall guests to come on my podcast, but the first under that specific name. So welcome.
It's an honor.
Happy to have you on.
It's an honor. Thank you so much for having me. Congrats on the name.
No problem. I knew I had to get you on the show. And so, for those who don't know how we met, we are taking this online music supervision course under the UCLA Extension Program. That's what it's called? Yep. And so under the UCLA Extension Program, our professor is Ryan Svensson. He is a well-known dope. He is a legend, music supervisor. I mean, he's worked on many projects such as La La Land, and he has also received an award for being on Lil Nas's Industry Baby, playing the trumpet. And so congratulations to him. And so we really appreciate him just sharing his knowledge and his resources. So, Anika, just to give you some insight of what this podcast is all about, we just kick back, we just relax, and we just talk about music and film. I am not going to come on here and talk about, and quiz you talking about, what is the process of licensing and all that stuff? We don't have to get into all that. We just going to just basically chill and have some good vibes. That's it.
I love that. Okay, good. Let's do it.
So go ahead and introduce everybody and basically what is your background and what you've been doing.
For sure. So hi everyone. So nice to meet you all. I'm Anika. I am very excited to be on this podcast today. I've actually never been on a podcast, so this is even more exciting. But background ethnically, just to kind of give a sense of where I'm from, is Romania. And then I grew up in the Bay Area, Oakland, Walnut Creek to be exact, before moving down to LA. So I've been in America pretty much my entire life. My background has really just been always about finding ways to connect with people through understanding their stories and what makes them them, and finding ways to elicit and evoke emotion. And that can be seen in kind of a variety of different ways, just in growing up and learning about what I really wanted to do. I mean, I think it's crazy that, when you're 17, 18, someone says, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? And how the heck are you supposed to even know, So I
Right.
to the things that you love and the things that kind of make you you and make you tick, like, are kind of the way to just start investigating what the world has to offer you, and vice versa, what you have to offer the world. So with that being said, at that time in my life, I really said, well, I think I have a lending ear to listen to people and to figure out what they want and who they are. And it just so happens that just over time to the industry, the entertainment industry. So conventionally or unconventionally, um, doing working on an inspirational radio show with someone in LA when I was back in the Bay Area, and I was an account manager out to like lawyers and to attorneys, basically saying, I need sponsorship for this show. Can you help me? And at the time I was like 17, 18, and I had no idea what the heck I was doing. And they absolutely last person that they probably ever wanted to talk to. So anyway, but I think because it was an inspirational talk show, right? Like being able to kind of connect with that specific host was really amazing. And so from there I said, this was, but I'm going to move on. And so then it ended up being that I moved to Loyola Marymount University and was working in admissions over there. And then from there, just decided, okay, well, what else? How can I get into the industry? It's something I always wanted to be a part of. So from there, just did a variety of things, from working in live action feature development, like at Village Roadshow Pictures, to music video production at London Alley Entertainment, doing entertainment, some help at the AFI Awards, like back in, November for 2 years. Kind of support on the ground when those were happening, helping filmmakers like know where to go, which is really cool, just as another way to get connected into the industry. And then I ended up working at DreamWorks and Pixar in animation production, moved there. Now I'm at Netflix. So kind of a long story. Short answer is, from Romania, grew up in the Bay Area, and then moved down here to do entertainment professionally. So that's my background.
Nice. You got some heavy hitters, on your resume, so keep doing it. Just keep doing it.
Yeah.
So much of a similar background, a little bit about me. I've also done some radio stuff. I've interned at some radio stations, some small, some funny stories. One of my friends on here, he'll tell you all about it. I mean, so back in my bachelor's, we got into a radio station that's basically around the corner. And most of their audience, they always play like oldies, so like 40s, 50s, and 60s. And so here comes this younger generation coming in, and I got to come in and work on Windows 2005, trying to record our shows. And so that was funny within itself. And I was a music business major, still didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. Doing work study on campus activities. I knew I wanted to do behind the scenes at that point. And then fast forward, I pursued my master's at Full Sail University. Still have no idea what I wanted to do. I basically pretended that I wanted to be a screenwriter. But finally, once we got to post-production sound, our professor, his name was Bill Benton. He's worked on Dances with Wolves and won an Oscars for it, so that was my favorite class. He mentions music supervisor and talking about how he had to collaborate with it. I said, go more in depth with it. And so he did. And when I tell you I had a chill go down my spine,
Like that's
it was like destiny just called my name right there. Just straightforward path right there.
awesome.
And so that's funny because it was the second to last class before we graduated.
Mm,
So I needed time to like catch up on what exactly a music supervisor does. And so I didn't know what to do. I certainly didn't feel like paying to go back to school. I already got tuition building up. And so I said, you know what? COVID hit and podcasts are booming. Let me just talk about music and film because I love talking about it. And so the goal is basically to like basically like you connect and network within this industry that's within my passion because I just knew I belonged here. And so it's nice to have a conversation
mm,
with someone just as passionate as I am.
mm.
So that's basically my whole background story and basically like how you feel about the class right now and all the special guests that we had so far and their story.
Mm. Yeah, I think in general to just hear your story of, having that moment of saying this is, what I'm meant to do, this is where I belong, especially knowing like living in the kind of entertainment music like infrastructure and saying I want to create, I want to evoke, like I want to connect, I want to inspire. And then I think so often we put that out to the world so much of this is what I want to do for the world. And sometimes the world all of a sudden comes back and says, this is what you can do for me, and it sounds like
Mm.
that just happened while you were at Full Sail, which is really cool because here you are, upgrading your podcast,
Yeah,
just doing everything you can. So that's really awesome.
exactly. That's what it's all about. And I try so hard not to geek out in class for all the guest speakers that comes in, and I'll just be like trying to hold it in because it's late at night. So I'm just like, all right, here we go. We got this special person coming in, and it was all for those who don't know. We've had some heavy hitters come in as guests, and phew, I would have never imagined if anybody would have told me that I would be meeting these people online in class, I would have said you lying.
Yeah.
You lying straight through your teeth. But, here we are. And that kind of leads me to my questions like, was there anything that basically inspired you or told you that your music path, like this is it, this is where you're going?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'd be really keen to hear, from other people who have been in this industry, and have done so well, kind of on all broads of the spectrum in terms of people who are music supervisors, people who are in licensing, people who are in sync, like people who are artists, people who are dancers, and like there's definitely probably a commonality to all of them of like why they did get into the industry, and I think in general, like one of my favorite quotes, or I guess a summation of it is, you like always remember like what something made you feel, and I think not only does that go for people when you meet them and the connections that you have, if you're sitting at lunch with someone, but more so you feel it in entertainment with media, and I think one of the biggest ways to feel that is through music as a refuge, as an escape, I mean, it's gotten me through so many breakups, it's got me through like job admittances, like job refusals, like,
Mm.
I think every kind of point in life where you're dealing with something both positive and negative, like music has always been there, more than sometimes
Right.
life. And whether that's by playing an instrument, like I said, whether that's actually dancing, like no matter how you spin it, like music again has always been there. And so I think that's again the commonality that you'd probably find with all those people. And so growing up, like I just remember being, 5, 6 years old, watching like Michael Jackson on repeat, like his music videos, from Billie Jean to Remember the Time to Black or White,
Oh, yeah.
to Thriller, of course, to Bad, to Beat It. Like, I mean, just all of those, just one after another, Human Nature, like, and just feeling just the kind of organic, like, nature of what those songs meant and what they meant for the world, you know, and just like how it brought people together as well. I mean, you like hear Thriller and everybody just already knows it. And I think
just like that.
And just even, and I mean, everybody already has like a vision of the red jacket in their head and like the main, you know, dance moves and who is in the video. Like you just can see it, you know, and I think being able to so quickly create something that like cultivates that connection is so incredibly special. And so anyway, growing up, like watching MTV, you know, back in the 90s, early 2000s, and then just growing up playing piano and learning different instruments like guitar. And, you know, I was never a singer, but dance and being able to feel the music was always the way that I connected to it. And, you know, I feel like when the iPod Shuffle came out, or, you know, whatever the first one, it just revolutionized, or, you know, holding your CD player and your tape player around, you know, being able, or your boombox even, like to finally be able to cultivate like your own playlist and to have that with you, you know, instead of trying to burn it on a CD, was just so cool because it just revolutionized like how intimate your experience could be with music. And so kind of growing up, like I always just paid attention to like who are the artists that I love, you know. It wasn't so much like who's the publisher or who's the label, but you know, you ended up seeing like when you paid attention to things like that, names like Sony and Epic, you know, or RCA, or, you know, UMG, like you saw these things growing up all the time. So I think from listening to music, knowing kind of the key players, both in terms of artists, in terms of labels, like hearing songs that you felt sounded familiar. So like when it came to sampling, like, you know, that just shows that you are a student in life, you know, and you attach yourself to things, I think, where you just want to learn and nobody's telling you to do it, you know. And so from there on, you end up like amassing all of this knowledge that actually ends up becoming really helpful when you're in the industry. And says like, oh, what song do you think would sound good here? Who's that composer that did Gladiator, you know? And like you wouldn't even have to think about it because you just know it because you love it, you know.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
There, because of that, I've just never had a relationship like that with anything else. And so over time, it's just like, yeah, I guess music is, I don't know what facet I'll, you know, end up in, but something I'm really excited about just being open to, and finding kind of my way in it, which I'm guessing is probably similar for you, but I'd be keen to hear kind of your take on that as well.
Yeah. So you when you mentioned when you look at like all the labels and all that stuff, I never even bothered to look until my first internship at my first radio station, which was not the one I told you about, but before it was it was like within town that I was living in at the time. And it was a contemporary worship bluegrass radio station. And they put me on assignment to basically do data entry on Excel. And so I basically go through all these CDs and then I look as to what's labeled on there or what publisher and all that information. And then that's when I started getting all the knowledge and I was like, huh, I never realized that they were on the CDs. But now I paid attention to it. I'm like, duh, why wouldn't they be? And so, yeah, it's a similar come up with that. And when you mentioned how like people react to these certain songs, one of my jobs as a work study in my bachelor's was to be a DJ. I just play songs off my Spotify. And we would have like special events like Halloween, and it was like a Halloween festival. And as soon as I played Thriller, all the little children,
They just knew it.
they just knew it. They probably don't know who Michael Jackson is, but they know the song. And that was like one of the fun things as being a DJ, just seeing everybody react to just be like, oh, and I just be like, yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
Of course. I can't not play this. And so, yeah, and that's similar come up. And then you mentioned the quote that inspires you. Mine is pretty cheesy, but it's helped me through because it's from the Avatar, The Last Airbender. And it's when Uncle Iroh says, you're going through a metamorphosis, and in time you'll change you'll transform into the prince that you're meant to be. Something like that, I'm paraphrasing. And so that got me through because when COVID hit, And I I tell a lot of this I tell a lot of people this, but I actually had I applied to work at ESPN up in Connecticut as a music assistant.
Mm.
They saw my resume and they wanted to interview me. So the interview was on the phone. We talked. Everything was good. Hung up the phone. Boom. Later that day or the next day, they said we want you to come in for a second interview. This one will be online. I was like, okay. Whew. So I put my suit on, wake up early, get on, we talk. I try to remember everything I said on the phone and try to basically embellish it, get off. A few weeks later, they said, um, thank you for applying, but we decided to go with someone else. And that kind of like put me down because I'm like 2 interviews with ESPN and like still didn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of put me down for a bit. And I listened to a whole lot more music than I've ever did, from many genres to many cultures. I'm basically my playlist right now. You'll be going on a worldwide tour. It don't even make sense. And so with that, that kind of basically put me in more in a stable place. And that's why I'm so passionate as to doing this podcast at this point and taking that course. Is because I want to give the message to those who don't know like where to go, because there's going to be a lot of rejections.
Mm.
That's just the cons of pursuing this industry. Like you're going to get a lot of no's,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean you're still going to get that yes in time, and you ought to take it.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me, and so that's just how my comp is, and that's my inspirations. And I'm gonna tell you, when I was a kid, not only I listened to a lot of Michael Jackson or Anita Baker and all that stuff, but I watched a whole bunch of Disney, and so Lion King up there, Prince of Egypt up there, Tarzan. I didn't have any drums. I just made I just made lemonade out of lemons, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just like hit anything and just play along with the percussion parts.
Mm.
And so from that point on, I've been playing the bongos. I play bass, learning piano still, and that's what basically inspired me to be a musician, not professional, but I knew I wanted to be a part of music. And so now that I've learned about the music business, it's all coming to light now.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I think like a few things from that to kind of unpack is, you know, when you talk about getting a lot of no's, like, yeah, I think the industry in general is all about like grit and perseverance and tenacity. And again, I think if you want something bad enough, like it's 50% of the battle, because once you kind of convince everyone else of what you really want, sometimes you have to convince yourself too. But if people just know already in the back of your mind like what you want to do, then they're going to think of you, you know, especially because and when talent just kind of exudes from you, or passion exudes, like it's not something you can teach. You know, people who are in jobs and working, you know, over 40 hours a week and don't love it, like that does show for itself, you know. And so I think more so when you do love something so much, like that just, it's present to everybody. And so in finding every way of learning a new instrument, like you said, I mean, nowadays it's so much easier to go on YouTube or to find some type of, you know, software or whatever to figure out, okay, I really want to learn these chords on piano and I want to learn how to read sheet music, you know, versus from piano to guitar, and understand what the chords look like. Those are things that are so easily accessible nowadays. So finding ways to, you know, just immerse yourself in what those learnings are really, I think, does set you apart, and getting a sense of, okay, who are the major labels, and what where are the artists that I love, what labels are they a part of, you know, understanding like who are big writers and producers in the industry. Like that knowledge is really, really important for, you know, wherever you go, as much as it is in film, in terms of knowing writers and actors and directors. I mean, if you can just pull out writers, you know, in the back of your hat, basically, to say, oh, I think this person's a great comedic voice and I think they'd work here for this film, people are going to start like believing you if you A, have the conviction, but B, like really do know what you're talking about, because you are a lifelong student in that way. And I think in terms of like your own playlist, and being really eclectic and worldly, that's also huge. I think it's really advantageous for you, because knowing not only kind of key artists that are up and coming in the US, it's just as important to know just talent worldwide, in terms of different regions. And if you have a film specifically, you know, coming out of like Nigeria, you could say, well, who are some really big Nigerian artists that we want to come on and like help culturally like elevate the film, you know? And same thing, like if you're in Japan, like who are some big artists, in Germany? Like I think also it shows that, I think it's like food, the more open you are to your tastes of like, you know, a world palette, so to speak, the more open you are in general to everybody, I think, and the more open-minded people are. I think there's a huge correlation between those two things. And so again, like the fact that you are doing that is really cool. And I remember when I used to be an A&R intern, like every single Friday I would come up with a playlist and say, like, here's the biggest songs of the week, so, you know, this is why I think they're going to be big in the next few days, and this is why I think where they're going to gain traction. And it's just something I do now every time like New Music Friday comes out or Release Radar comes out. And most of the people are already signed anyway, so in terms of like an A&R perspective, like, you know, it's not the most helpful, but there's so many other, you know, avenues to find music where you can still do that. But it's really helpful to just have things in your pocket that you know, are ways to figure out like what's the haps, you know, what's in the zeitgeist right now, and how can I like bring that to life. So really cool.
It certainly does go a long way, because in a couple of my episodes so far, like I've interpreted music that are in Japanese, French, and even German. Because
Cool.
when I tell you Attack on Titans, don't get me started. Their songs are in German, and so I took the liberty of myself to embarrass myself behind the mic and read the German lyrics and then read the English translations, because I felt that it was very important to decipher the emotions that that were trying to convey in these songs just by reading those lyrics. Because when you watch it and when you listen to the soundtrack, period, you're in a whole new world. And so I try to basically put those on game who don't know anything about it. And same with the song that was in French. And same for all the Japanese songs, basically most of them from anime. I like to think that it just goes a long way, and to give more creative insight. So when people go to these films or they turn on Netflix and they watch these things, they don't basically take the music for granted, because it's trying to tell you something too. So when I tell you not to just watch the movie with your eyes, but you gotta also watch with your ears too, because it's also trying to convey the similar message and similar themes. And so just like knowing that stuff, I always like to believe if I just pitch that to somebody, to some professional, it will go a long way from there. Just I'm not expecting anything out of that, but just a simple networking, or just like you, just simple conversation, just like that.
Yeah.
And just stay connected because of similar passions and how we think and how we interpret music, you know? So definitely goes a long way with that.
Yeah, and I think in terms of, you know, when it comes to music that's in a language that you don't know yourself, it goes for film too in terms of localization, is sometimes the translation also isn't completely honest to like what the original intent was. In terms of like grammar, syntax, like a certain word of just substituting in and out can actually be a huge change, you know, to say like, oh, well, she was deeply saddened versus like she was upset. Like those two things have really different kind of gravities to them. And I think with music as well, the beautiful thing is a lot of times you don't need to always understand the words to get a sense of what the song is talking about. You know, it's like the melody and the instrumentals that they use already kind of provoke so much thought of what you associate, you know, certain instruments with. Like if it's, you know, if it's like a high string, you know, sometimes it can be it can feel like very sad or like very solemn, you know, versus like a piano also evokes kind of a similar feeling, versus like a bass guitar can sometimes be a lot more on the like intense action side of things. You know, it all depends on, you know, the key. But I think that's the beautiful thing about being open to music worldwide is you can see all of that, you know.
Perfect example. I just talked about this, but revisiting Attack on Titans, one of their songs called, and I'm gonna try to say it correctly, Vocal in Celtic. Probably messed that up. But that song is 6 minutes long because like the first 2, maybe 3 minutes is all bright. There's bright choir and it just talks about life in general, just living life, the 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 nurture of nature and stuff like that. The next half, the drums hit.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, she's singing about everyone's gonna die one day. It's just inevitable. I'm like, okay, I didn't know about that in the English translation, but I can have that sense just by listening the song at its authenticity in the German language that something was just like something has changed. Like the mood has definitely just completely did a 180. And so when you take the time and then you do read the English translations, then you're just like, whoa, you're just sunken into a whole nother level now.
Oh,
And so just talking about that,
so much.
uh, it's just incredible.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, you talking about that, and I'm just thinking like of Bring Me to Life. You know, just the
Yeah, exactly.
this is intense. And even Bohemian Rhapsody is really similar to that. You know,
Oh, that that song goes everywhere, and trust me,
it is.
everybody, all the lip syncing, and all the karaoke's that I've had to endure during my work study, you wouldn't believe like some of the creativity they actually put into that too, like throughout the whole song, and it was just really fun. But yeah, the songs like those, like you definitely get a sense of like how the song changes and how this could maybe work inside of a film. And when you think about it, because every time I do, I always get on my editing software and just like edit the music towards these certain scenes,
Mm,
just for spare time.
mm.
But so talking about film, do you have a favorite film or TV show and why?
Yeah, I think I have two answers for this. In terms of lately, probably Euphoria. Have you seen it?
I have not. Everybody keeps telling me about it, but I have listened to some of the soundtrack.
Yeah, Labyrinth did an amazing job. And the cool thing about it is it's integrated so incredibly well, like throughout the entire series. Like there's just moments, certain kind of musical motifs come back from like the soundtrack, and
Don't worry about spoilers. I mean, feel free to mention anything that you liked in certain scenes or whatever. Go ahead.
the notes that are used and the key that's used, it just you feel it and you hear it and you immediately feel something with it. You know, sorrow, whether it be grief, whether it be um, regret. Sometimes, you know, you can tell it's like a very heavy show. Like it evokes a lot of really kind of heavy, more negative emotions. I think be hard to watch, to be honest, because it just is really heavy and deals with real life crap, you know,
Yeah.
like romantically and emotionally abusive relationships, like adultery. I mean, there's just sexuality and exploring it and what that means. And so it's, you know, it's not your light comedy like BoJack Horseman, I would say, you know, or like even
Yeah.
SpongeBob can get really dark. Don't mind me. But anyway, I think just in general, like Labyrinth did such a great job. But in general, there's so many needle drops in that show. Like there's a prom scene, and artistically, it's also just a beautiful show in the sense of the cinematography, the lighting in certain episodes is like godly.
Mm.
So I think, you know, all those things together artistically, it just really is beautiful. But there's, for example, this prom scene, and it feels at the end of season 1, and it feels like they use a different song almost every single scene. And mind you, there's a lot of scenes and like a sequence. So with that being said, I feel like there were, I don't know, like 8 different songs in a matter of like 10 minutes or something like that.
Wow.
I mean, that might be a total like exaggeration, but it felt like that just in terms of how much it was kind of intercutting. And I'm not talking about songs that you've never heard about. I'm talking about like, yeah, by Usher. I don't think that was in there, but something of its equivalent, you know, and like blow,
Some heavy hitters.
you know, like just heavy bangers of like the early 2000s to just evoke like that time period. But then it goes with a lot of like softer songs as well, that some were like known, some weren't. But I think that show, along with Insecure, like gives light to so many kind of new artists coming up and people that you might hear in the zeitgeist or be familiar with. So I think in general, like from a music supervisor like position, thinking about all the clearances, you know, that went into that show and all the work of
The budget.
but also just the cues, I think, like are so many in terms of, you know, when the song cuts out, when it actually kind of comes in, whether it's a fade, whether it's a hard cut, like, and sometimes if you're watching the show, you'll think, oh, I wouldn't even think to add like music in the scene, you know, or like, oh, I wouldn't even think to start this here. But it's the way where you notice it when it starts, and it actually is really powerful when it starts. But then sometimes you actually don't realize that it's still going in the best way possible because it feels like you're there. So in general, like artistically, Euphoria is just, I think, an incredible show. But in terms of, so I would definitely recommend to watch it. Definitely at your own pace, because I binged it this past week and a half, like both seasons, and it was hard emotionally, I will say that. But I just remember after the first episode, I was so hooked, and because there's just a really big kind of reveal of how certain people are connected. But at the very beginning of every single episode, there's kind of a song that sets the pace for that episode. And the first episode is Labyrinth, and I think it's Forever is the first song. I could be totally wrong, but it just evokes this like transcendental, like fantasy feeling, which goes into the overdose of drugs and like how good drugs can be and feel, not be, but feel. And what that it sets the pace for addiction. So it's just really cool how they're able to connect, you know, certain songs to like thematic motifs as well. So yeah, it's just really impressive all around.
That's crazy because I always love listening to Labyrinth's like a movie. Anytime I get in that mood, like that song is my jam. And I found that song on a commercial. I think it was on one of those one of the iPhone commercials. And ever since then I just got hooked onto that. So seeing that Labyrinth worked on Euphoria, I'm like, man, that's crazy. And hearing all the tracks, I'm like, wow, okay. I guess I need to get HBO Max or wherever it's on and try this out for sure.
Definitely. It's I can't remember the first song I ever heard from Labyrinth, just looking at it now. Maybe?
I have the soundtrack up right now, and I don't know if it's what you're talking about, but I see the first song on the soundtrack is Formula.
Yeah, so I think that's actually what opens the show, not Forever. But oh my god, Formula is so good. Yeah, it's so good. I think the first song I ever heard from Labyrinth was Beneath You're Beautiful. It made me cry, like beyond sobbed. I think I saw it on Dancing with the Stars. Like, I don't remember who danced to it, but and it wasn't even Labyrinth. It was a cover like band, you know, while they were doing Dancing with the Stars. But in terms of, like emotionally, I was so moved. Like, there's just something so beautiful about everything that he does, and that definitely like ruminates in the Euphoria soundtrack as well. But just the opening notes of Formula, like definitely they're so impactful immediately. So with the opening scene of Euphoria is crazy, you know? They do a really good job of like hooking you like that. So definitely recommend. But Insecure is another one of those shows of just like constant needle drops as well. And they just feel so, I think, timely in a way. Like they feel so relevant, it feels current, but it also just kind of helps the audience feel connected in a way where you don't just feel like a spectator to like Issa's, you know, relationship with Molly or whoever else. Like, you know, when it always feels like it's in the right places. Like if Issa's driving and it's like some really cool like R&B track, you know, you're like, oh, I feel like a cool person right now.
Right.
I feel the way she's driving.
You know, I think I made a mistake. I think it might actually be New Girl. It's like I was on a playlist, not the actual original score or soundtrack. So it could be Formula because it's right after New Girl, but either one of the two.
I think it is Formula.
Okay.
Hopefully somebody's listening and is saying that's wrong, but
yeah,
the whole soundtrack is amazing. So really cool to see, you know, an artist like Labyrinth do a soundtrack like Euphoria as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I like how you dissected like the themes in the show alone, because I've been rewatching Cowboy Bebop, and those themes are like very similar as to like, you know, relationships and basically going through life and stuff like that, and the music out of this world as well. But I also got through watching and you may have watched this, but Love, Death and Robots.
Yeah.
I watched the new season last Friday.
New season yet?
Let me tell you, the very last episode was done so well in terms of like conveying the message of basically like greed. But the last scene where she finally gets her voice back, the music that came up, the intensity of the strings, and how it's like a combination of victory and tragedy. That's what Euphoria kind of gave me when I listened to the soundtrack. It took me back to that episode and that scene, specifically the music. So definitely I found some similarities, so I'm gonna check out Euphoria. And so which we transition now to soundtrack itself. Is there a specific soundtrack that sticks out to you the most?
Yes. Have you seen Dark on Netflix? Speaking of German shows,
I've seen one episode.
I'm guessing it was the pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pausing because I have so much to say about Dark, and I'm trying to succinctly. But Dark to me, so it is, just for background, it is Germany's first live-action local original from Netflix, which is really cool. Okay. The pioneer, and I think with that, it is just one of the smartest shows I've ever watched because tonally, or I guess it's about, you know, this group of kids. So a lot of people actually related to Stranger Things, which I think they are similar in a lot of ways, but they're also very distinct from one another. But it's about kids in this like really small town, and there's just kind of a lot of what feels like supernatural things happening in terms of kids disappearing a lot and birds falling from the sky at like a really big amount, and they're just all dropping dead at the same time, and
nice.
Certain like smoke clouds coming from this power plant, and you know, it's interesting because all of these things are so interconnected and everyone is so interconnected, and they take that to a whole nother level in this show as it comes to parallel universes and the rules of three, and that goes even into colors as well. So you see primary colors constantly, which also give note to like certain motifs. And so it's about these kids who are destined to figure out how everyone really is connected in this town after disappearances have happened. And there's time travel. And so all of a sudden now it deals with the past, future, and present. And two characters, but one really in particular, his name is Jonas. Jonas is the one person who figures out how to open these portals to go back in time. And so the pilot starts out with one of these, with his dad actually like taking his own life, and then also one of the kids in his group going. And you find out over time how connected those things really are, and it's just muggling every single time. So the first season, I would say, definitely, I'm just giving background on the show, but it's definitely much more kind of a mysterious, spooky tone. And then by season 3, because there's 3 seasons, of course, dealing in like the rules of 3, but the third season is very much like spiritually religious and very scientific. So it's cool to see kind of the progression of the show as you're going into like different universes and different time periods, basically. But anyway, the reason why it's out so much is because the music is so memorable, and I wish I had a clip up to show you. In talking about colors, the way to like show the motifs, music in the soundtrack is used very, very similarly. So like specific instruments are used, couldn't tell you what they are. And like certain synths are used, but really the motifs around kind of the antagonists of the show and how much present. It's like this, I don't even want to do it because it's going to sound like crap, but they're one of the biggest kind of like parts of the show is radioactive energy from this power plant and how that also fits into everything. And there's just, I think it might be violin, but there's this awful sound that's related to it, and it's like this, like it's so placeable and unforgettable. And every single time that sound happens in the show, you're like, oh shit, like something's about to go down, you know?
Like, you know, he's about to go up. I was like, oh no, here we go.
But it's really kind of mystical as well, the score sometimes. So it's like just eerie as it is kind of intriguing. And that's the nature of the show in general, is like, I think those two words put together, both in parallel, is like, God, I'm so intrigued, but this is so mysterious and I have no idea what the hell is going on. But oh my God, I'm really anxious and scared at the same time. And of that, which is the score is done by Ben Frost, just is so like emblematic of those feelings, and it just evokes that so well. Like I said, I couldn't tell you, I haven't like dissected exactly what instruments they used or how Ben put it together, but oh my God, like it's really good. And the theme song is also, it's not done by Ben Frost, it's done by I think this German band who I'm gonna butcher the name, but I think they're called Apparats, and the theme song is called Goodbye. The opening visuals of it are so interesting because again, it's like distorted imagery, so you never know what something really is. So if there's like a cup, for example, it's like divvied up in like a mirror, so you can't actually understand what the image is, which is again like, you know, a metaphor for the show and figuring out like how things mirror each other. But that song as well, key wise, actually relates a lot to the chords and to the instruments that Ben uses. So like the two meld into each other really, really well, and both have this like very kind of mysterious and mystical feeling to them. So the music in general is just brilliant. Like it comes at the right times. It again just is like, it knows exactly what you should feel in every single moment to feel it, and allows you to kind of connect the dots too of people that are maybe connected, or items that might be actually triggering to say, oh my God, like you gotta pay attention to this one, you know? So,
Right.
really good.
Yeah, I like it when scores have specific leitmotifs for these certain characters or whatnot. Like I always refer to Godzilla King of the Monsters. I love how Bear McCreary um, incorporates each leitmotif for these monsters. But say you got a track where it's just the humans talking, but there's like a small cameo of say like Ghidorah's theme where they're talking about him in the past. And so I like it when it like incorporates those leitmotifs into something that's like they're not there, but it's like spiritual wise, they're there in spirit. So I like that effect right there. So definitely I'll keep watching Dark. I had some priorities,
I know.
but I'm gonna get back to watching Dark for sure.
Oh my god, it's so good. Let me see. Can I play an example of it? Is that something I
You can.
Okay. Let me try and search this really quick. If it takes too much time, then I won't do it.
We claim no copyright.
Oh yeah, no, I won't. But anyway, just look up like dark power plant sound or like dark opening, and you'll know the sound when you
Put me in the world.
because you're like, oh, that's really unpleasant, you know. Yeah, I'll send it to you after this, but yeah, it's really good.
Gotcha. And was that like the only soundtrack that ever stuck out to you, or was there anything like in the past that made you attracted to music, movie soundtracks in general?
Yeah, I think in general, like the one from my childhood, which I feel like is probably everyone else's, you know, not to like put a stance on it, but is Pirates of the Caribbean or Caribbean, however you want to say it. And so I think Klaus, I don't know how to say his last name, Badelt.
I think Badelt. That's how I've been saying it.
Yeah, is just brilliant because the Jack Sparrow theme, you know, when he's on the boat.
Yep.
I mean, you think Jack Sparrow and you immediately play that in your head. Kind of like what we were talking about earlier with Thriller is like you play the
right.
starts to dance and they know the dance because it's just so well known. And I think just in terms of being able to make that correlation of music and a character or music in a film that's so widely known, no matter your background, no matter culturally where you come from, like no matter your identity, like no matter what, it is just something that everybody is able to like enjoy together, you know, or that knows. Mm-hmm. And to be able to make that through sound, let alone music, you know, is just incredible because how the heck do you do that? You know, like what recently comes close to that, you know, which might be a hot question, hot statement, but I think with Pirates, like that theme song also just brings you into like the setting and the world of like literal pirates so incredibly well. Like you hear the score, you don't even watch the film, and you're like, I know where I'm supposed to be right now, and I think
supposed to be on a ship somewhere out in the middle of the ocean,
or like, oh my god, I'm about to get raided by pirates, you know, when like the curse of Pearl comes in, and you know it's like that opening shot of seeing the ships in the distance, and you're like, oh god, this doesn't look good. So I just think in general, again, to be able to connect something like that is so amazing. And you know, we talked about it too, like John Williams and the Imperial March and Star Wars, you know, just like for Darth Vader too, knowing that is like Darth Vader's theme song is crazy. Like again, what characters have a theme?
You automatically think about him too.
Yeah, like what characters have a theme song these days? Like I think that art form is like it's just not as present, I feel like, nowadays, you know, when you watch in terms of even establishing those characters as characters to follow for the rest of your life, or you know, someone to dress up as and during Halloween, or someone that you really look up to, you know. And I think people look up to Jack Sparrow in a lot of ways and love him as a character, and a lot of people also hate him, but that makes like for a great character, that makes for a great conversation. And again, just score wise, like to just be kind of the cherry on top, to do that is amazing. Like I can't even imagine how good that feels, you know. Like I saw Hans Zimmer in concert at Coachella a few years ago, and that was like,
oh nice,
it was crazy, you know. But one of my all-time favorite songs is actually from Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, and it's called Up Is Down. It's also do you know that song?
Oh yeah. You ain't gotta tell me. You ain't gotta explain it. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I don't even know how to explain it. Maybe you do, because that song, just the way it like takes you, it feels like it takes you in a circle, which is what happens
Yeah,
right when the boat is like going like,
exactly. There you go.
and
Once you put it all together, like,
and then you're like, you know,
you know,
I just he's like masterful in his way to like put image to sound, which sounds
hmm
instead of putting sound to image, he literally puts image to sound. Like you don't have to even
yeah,
and watch that, and you like know already what you're looking at. Like, how do you do that? You know?
yeah. It's funny because at first I wasn't interested in Pirates of the Caribbean when I was young, but I watched the second movie first,
Ah,
then I watched the third movie, and then I went to the first movie.
oh,
So that would explain as to why I thought Hans Zimmer did all three of those movies. So that's my excuse. But um, Klaus, I give him a whole bunch of props for that because the one track that sticks out for me is the was the when Elizabeth was on a ship with with what's the guy's name?
Orlando Bloom with Will Turner.
No. The bad guy's name.
Oh, I don't know.
Anyway, when they were skeletons and she finally realized that what they are, and they were toying with her, and that part of the score where it goes like boom 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 boom. I was like, ooh, okay, okay. And then you hear the modification um, later in the franchise in the fourth movie, I think, on Stranger Tides, I think when Jack Sparrow and the girl were trying to like set a mutiny on Blackbeard's ship,
Mm.
and I love how he modified that. And so that's one of the favorite things I love from that franchise is that part alone. But yeah, I get it. The Jack Sparrow leitmotif, like it's it's legendary. It's so iconic. And I found out that Klaus also, I don't know if you watched the movie Time Machine with Guy Pearce.
Yeah.
He did that too. And what I liked about what he did was uh, the music that he did for the tribe. I honestly felt he kind of paved the way for Avatar,
That's interesting.
the blue people Avatar,
Yeah.
because when you play the leitmotif of the tribal people, and then in Avatar, I think it's called Jake's First Flight.
Mm.
They are very similar. You can play one or the other,
Mm.
and vice versa, and it gives you much similar vibes. And God rest the soul of James Horner. Uh, I like to believe that Klaus kind of paved the way like for that because both of their tones are like very similar
Mm.
in terms of like the tribal and this theme of basically life in general.
Mm.
That's how I feel. That's one of the soundtracks that really sticks out to me. And like I said, Lion King, Prince of Egypt,
Oh my God, yeah.
especially Prince of Egypt with God's leitmotif. And I've also explained the motif between Moses and Ramses when they split.
Mm.
And the track is called Goodbye Brother. And every time they have an encounter after Moses ran away, that motif plays along, and then you hear it again for the last time when Moses crosses over the Red Sea and he's looking over and Ramses screaming, Moses! And I'm just like, oh man, the things you realize from your childhood and you finally get it now, it's just a light bulb just flips on your head for real.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the amazing things about it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just thinking about again what you were saying, specifically for Klaus when you're at that scene with Elizabeth, you know, and everyone's turning into skeletons. Like something that is really similar that Hans actually did is like in The Lion King when Simba is coming down, you know, when all the like wildebeests or whatever they are like running through the gorge, and you just feel that so strongly, you know? Why are you smiling?
I was going to have an episode coming up literally talking about the Stampede,
Oh, the Stampede, yeah,
but I'm gonna give a little teaser. So the score for the Stampede, that main melody that you hear, that that goes dun 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 dun
Yeah.
dun 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 dun. It doesn't only play in the Stampede. It plays in another scene.
Does it play at the end with Scar? Or where does that
Before the ending.
uh
So Simba's all grown up, and he's with Rafiki at this time.
hmm.
And so
When they're looking
I'm gonna explain.
yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna explain it visually. So when after the stampede, right, and Simba's being chased by the hyenas,
Yeah.
and he falls down the cliff and goes to the thorn bush.
Yeah.
When you're looking at the movie, he's running uh to your right, right. But fast forward to now Simba's grown up and he's following Rafiki through the woods again.
Mm.
He's going to your left.
Ah.
And it's that metaphor of him going back to his past.
Oh.
And you hear it. You hear the stamp. You hear that cameo of the stampede within that percussion bit.
Oh wow.
It took me till the live action remake to actually put that together musically.
It's just unbelievable, like the subliminal like connections that artists think about in that way that becomes so
Yeah,
seen by an audience member who might not think twice about it, but
exactly.
get into dissecting those things and appreciating them, it just adds another layer of like, oh my god, I saw Lion King 20 years ago, and to like be able to investigate something new through that connection, to that music or whatever motif it would be, it just adds so much more artistry to everything, and
Exactly.
being even more meticulous, and it's just crazy. Like, what the heck? How do people do that?
Trust me, I've watched this movie 20 million times and still never noticed.
Yeah.
I've listened to the soundtracks, all versions of it, 20 million times. Only realized it 2 years ago.
It just goes to show you there's always something new to learn.
There's always something, always something. And so this has been a very great conversation for real. I love the passion. I love your energy. I love where you're coming from and all that stuff. So I'm glad I got to know you. I'm glad I got to take that course because there's a lot of good people in there. So I definitely got to talk to everybody. And for you to come on here, uh,
I'm very honored. I'm very
I give you all the applause and I appreciate you so much. And so that leads me into my last question. If you were to make your own life soundtrack, what sort of elements would you require and what point of your life would you be emphasizing, whether if it's your goals, your trials, your personality, etc.?
I have an answer for this, but I actually don't know if it's the one I want to say. But I think in general, like the soundtrack to anything just allows you to immerse yourself even more strongly into like a character's point of view, like whether, I mean, typically like it can be more of a spectator moment where you're getting context of what the scene is setting, or it can be a moment where emotionally you're diving way deeper into knowing somebody's like internal thoughts, because in a lot of ways, like knowing the music somebody loves and likes, and the art want to be around or to be like, or that they really look up to, is a really intimate way to get to know people. It's like food, being able to
Right.
do something and say, this is like my family's great ancestral recipe, and to invite you into like that feeling and that like moment of tasting something for the first time, whether you like it or not, but especially if you like it, it just gets you into like their world,
Mm-hmm.
a sense and a mirror to somebody and a lens that you may not have like investigated prior. So anyway, with my own music soundtrack, I think everybody when they're walking down the street or driving the car, like is playing their song that's like, oh yeah, this is me, I'm a bad bee, and I'm
Yeah.
Hollywood, like blasting Future or whatever, And so I think in that moment, it's like, oh yeah, I could see this in a movie, you know, like what, going to dinner or whatever. But then I think there's a lot more intimate moments where somebody might be alone or be, you know, not as confident in what they're doing. And it can be a moment of like grief, you know, and losing like somebody, like a parent, you know, or going through a break.
Absolutely.
And being able to kind of ruminate in the slower, stiller moments, whether it be more silent, you know, and somber, or whether it be like devastating and full of grief, or whether it be like a you know, moment of passion and excitement and confidence. Like those experiences and those emotions we go through every single day. So I think with like finding specific bigger moments where you can experience that, like getting into college or graduating or like liking somebody for the first time, you know, like those are moments that everybody shares in one way or another, you know, like everybody remembers their first breakup, right? Like whether you were sad, whether it was weird because you were like in sixth grade and you were like, I shouldn't even be dating anyone, you know, like I'm too young. Or if you're like 40 and getting divorced, you know, like that is a feeling everybody goes through, losing somebody. So I think, you know, my soundtrack would just find the moments that feel universal to everyone, so that, you know, it's like, yeah, you know exactly like what I'm thinking in this moment. And the fact that this is the song, like, is an interesting choice potentially, you know. And I think growing up like in middle school and high school and watching a lot of films that feel like you know, like drama flicks, you know, of somebody growing up at that time and not knowing their body or their emotions, or like experiencing things for the first time, and you're in high school, so you think the world revolves around you, and you know, your like life view is really small in a lot of ways. Like everything you experience at 110% intensity, because
Right.
how could you not? So I think finding ways to also like evoke that would be really cool. And I think at that time of my life specifically, I was listening to like a lot of rock and like I don't want to say metal because it wasn't that, you know, but in like 3 Days Grace and like Disturbed and Avenged Sevenfold, you know, which are like, I feel like bands in general, people were like, what the heck? You used to listen to those, you know? And I'm like, yeah, Animal.
I get the same reaction too.
Yes.
I get the same reaction to, like, ever since I moved out of New York, I've always listened to rock, but I wasn't deep. So, like you said, I've listened to the Paramores, the Linkin Parks,
Oh,
R.I.P. to Chester, uh, and 3 Days Grace.
and,
Those got me through.
oh my God.
And Skillet.
Yes. Yes. Never Too Late. I mean, Riot, like Let's Start a Riot, like that song was so, I just remember feeling,
I'll be blasting that song.
I mean, just to even go from like specifically for 3 Days Grace, right? Like, and I grew up listening to a lot of Green Day, you know?
Oh yeah.
The really cool thing about bands like that is in one moment you're in just like this really intense, like hard rock moment, you know, like Animal I Have Become with like, Russian and like the bass guitar, you know, as it starts that song is so freaking cool.
You better speak on it.
Late, for example, with like the piano is like a lot softer, you know, and I think just the vitality of those feelings and being able to find a band that kind of operates on such intense like sides of the spectrum is so cool, because you're like, oh, I know what it feels like to feel angsty and frustrated, and then also
Yeah.
I also know what it feels to like be down and to feel like this sucks right now, you know. And so anyway, like growing up and listening to bands like that, like the emotion is so intense, you know, especially at that age. So I think like, you know, that time in my life would be very much, you know, with artists such as that. And I think in high school it was a lot more pop, and then in college it was definitely like the EDM, you know, kind of things. But that also just goes with the time period and how old I was, you know. You know, which is cool because I think there's a lot of similarities, or can be, to like Animal I Have Become and like Animals, you know, by like there's certain moments of both of those songs that actually feel really similar intensity wise, you know, even though instrument wise they're so different, you know, but tempo and pacing and stuff like that, like you're like, oh, I feel the same angsty version, but no, the animals, you know, instead of animal I've become. And maybe there's actually more to investigate there of how they're like potentially connected just by title. But anyway, and then now in my life, I think at that time in high school and middle school, which I guess maybe this is getting a bit more philosophical than it should, but you grow into yourself, right? Like you have a lot more clarity in your self-identity and who you are and your confidence in that and your self-worth. And I think there's a reason why I listened to things that were so intense, you know, back in those days, because I felt intense and I didn't really know like where I sat, you know. But now I feel like the stuff I listen to is a lot more R&B and hip hop, and it's a lot like of Bryson Tiller and Summer Walker and like Kehlani, who I'm obsessed with, and Travis Scott and Drake and Future, and you know, I mean, there's just so many names like Nafe Smalls. I'm obsessed with currently, so like a more up and coming artist. And anyway, so I think like being able to be, and I listen to a lot of German rap as well, which I recommend everyone to listen to. And
Interesting.
and like there's a lot of like really cool Italian rock, and there's also French like hip hop, which is really cool, and then like a lot of Afro beats are freaking dope. So it's really cool, and like I love reggaeton as well, you know.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So anyway, I think like it goes back to what I said earlier, is the more open you are to different music and the more kind of eclectic and worldwide your taste is, the more open I think you are to just life. And I think being able to show that in a soundtrack as you progress, you know, in whatever way that means, is awesome, you know?
Yeah, I like that because originally being from New York, I'm listening to all like old school hip hop and R&B. Then I moved down to Virginia. I get more into rock. So like I said, the Paramours and Linkin Parks. And what's funny is that I feel like Paramour's Crush and Linkin Park's Faint. It kind of sounds a little familiar, but I don't know. Maybe it's because I've been watching too much YouTube mashup. But uh, go ahead.
Crush, Crush, Crush by Paramore?
Yeah,
Yeah. Ah, cool.
which is very easy to play on the bass. I found that out. And and then I go to college. Um, well, rewind a little bit. I went to Europe, and it was through the People to People program, and we went to like 6 different European countries.
Oh,
And
cool.
I had a homestay in Germany,
Ah,
and the siblings, it was their last day of school, and they had like this DJ EDM party. I'm like, oh, okay, wait a minute, we ain't got this. And so I didn't really listen to a lot of the music there, but it did inspire me to get out of the country musically and listen to what they got now and traditional like way back in medieval time style. Right. So I listened to the old Nordic music, and I think it's because the show The Last Kingdom, I love it so much. Mm. Uh, I geek out so much just listening to the songs from that. And like you said, and even Native American music. I actually did a report in my bachelor's in music history class where it's like we had to choose like a music genre and talk about it. And so I thought like maybe I can give like a voice to Native American music, and some of the DJs like a Tribe Called Red, but I think they changed their name recently. They've been putting out some bangers out there, and so Native American music, South American music, African, Japanese. I made it to Mongolia even. So that kind of wide range of genre, that fluidity I got, I think is maybe the person that I am today, and want to be pursuing this music business. And so, but to cap this off, I would say with my life soundtrack, just to give a little bit of example, I kind of like compose it in my head as to how I walk, right? So like every step I take is always like a beat.
yeah.
Whatever genre you want, it could be funk or rock. I tend to go like the more. I, I like how the Japanese do it, especially in their animes, where they mix the popular music, but the classical elements are not just in the background. Like they're kind of vertically aligned. You know what I mean? So like the pianos and the strings and stuff like that. So it goes in different tones, and depending how I step, whether I move quick, you can put like a happy tone. I move slow, you can put a more uh a depressing tone, you know what I mean? So that's kind of like how I picture my life soundtrack and all the elements because I've been in concert band and so I played second clarinet. I always love playing second clarinet because I'll mess up my scales on purpose because we didn't get no choice as to which seat we want to be in. So I'm like, I kind of want to stay in second and third clarinet. So I just mess up the scales on purpose.
Mm.
But so I just put all the instruments in like one section, the woodwinds, the strings in the middle, and the brass on the right. I feel like I'm a conductor of my own
Mm.
path of my own life,
Yeah.
and so that's what leads me. That's what inspired me to ask these questions. So I really thought I was hoping it would be interesting to ask.
No, I think that's really cool. And I think music is so intimate to like somebody in the way that they think, right? So for your soundtrack to be about the way you step and potentially like really attaching to percussion instruments and that beat, that just always is kind of present, setting the tempo of things is like, I think that says a lot about the way someone is, and the things that they like think about and just the way that they see themselves existing in space, which sounds so existential, but really I think it comes down to that. And I think it is an interesting question to ask someone, like, do you listen to like a melody or do you listen to the actual beat? Like when you listen to a song, like what do you attach to more? It's like the lyrics or the actual like tempo? And for me specifically, it's always the tempo because I'm like, yeah, like I just want to be able to feel it, and I feel it when, you can, when the tempo or the, whatever the percussion instruments are, like mimic your heartbeat and you're like, oh, I'm one with the music right now. That's really cool. And I could give less about the lyrics, which isn't to like shit on any artistry at all, but it's just more so, how you think about those things and how that comes into the music that you love and listen to and that you explore, like you were saying. So I think that's really awesome, Jeremiah, and thank you for sharing everything that you have as well.
Yeah, no problem. I always try to share as much as I can. That's the whole point of this podcast. And so just widening your mind and widening your ears,
Yeah,
hopefully making a little difference.
definitely.
But Anika,
This has
I
been
very much appreciate you coming on to the new Playlist Shuffle podcast. Very much. I know you're busy a lot, so we made it. Now we got through it. And so if there's any last remarks before we cap this off, I'll see you in class next week.
in class next week. Yeah, see you then, and we'll get
All right.
it.
All right. Well, this has been the Playlist Shuffle podcast. Our special guest, Anika Jess of Netflix. Uh, we're signing off. Y'all have a great weekend. Stay safe
Yeah.
and be breezy and keep your minds open. I know we got Stranger Things out. The new volume is out, so I'm tuning in right now. So open your ears, open your minds, and y'all have a good night, and especially to you too, Anika.
Thank you. Have a good night and take good care.
You too.
Bye.